listeners, welcome back to the Time to Level Up podcast. So today, I'm going to giggle as I'm talking about this, but today on the podcast,
How weird is it to do the intro with your podcast producer watching you?
This is why I'm giggling. So today on the podcast is my podcast producer, Stacey Harris of Uncommonly More. And so this is kind of funny that because sometimes I do the intro separate than the podcast. And she sometimes will send me messages like, hey, we have the whole recording, but you never did the intro. That's what happened yesterday. So now I said to her, since she's right here, we're just going to do the intro all together. So instead of me telling everybody who you are, Stacey, you tell everybody who you are, and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about.
I love it. I'm Stacey Harris. I am the producer of this and many other podcasts, including my own, the More Profitable podcast. I spend all day, every day, thinking about, listening to, watching, because some are video, like this one, podcasts. And what we really focus on is people, business owners who are using their podcast to generate, educate, and convert right fit clients. So these aren't podcasts that are built to attract listeners and sell sponsorships. They're built to attract, nurture, and convert a customer, generally into service or info-based, think coaches, consultants, service providers kind of businesses. So we talk about building sales assets. We talk about building production cycles that work for us. We talk about building episodes that when you need to, you can pull and repurpose from. And that's how I spend my time. I've been doing this 12 years. I've had my podcast 11 years. So when I started podcasting, there were 3 women.
3. Okay,
that's an exaggeration, but it was a very different space.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to think, when did I start listening to podcasts? Probably, let's think about this. I would say maybe 2014. Well, that's kind of ish when you started. So that's...
My podcast launched in November of 2013.
Yeah.
So you were right there.
I was. And I remember teaching people how to listen to a podcast way back in the day. Because I would say, I heard this, and then they didn't know what I was talking about. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. A big part of my marketing when I launched the podcast was not like it is now, where you just tell people you have a podcast and you send them a link. It was literally a video I released on how to find it.
Right.
Like they were up on my website, but like, how do you listen to these while you're walking your dog? Which is, we know, like, the point, right?
The point, right.
Totally so I had a whole video on my podcast's like landing page. At the top of it, it was not like trying to talk you into listening or like telling you what was great about the show. All the before, like above the fold things we would think of now. It was literally a YouTube video on how to get podcasts to pull up on your phone.
Some people still need that. Maybe we should be sending them that. But anyway,
it's true.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. So Stacey and I have been working together since I think like episode 69, 7, something around there, 68.
It's almost, I think this spring will be 2 years.
Okay. So 2 years. So when I first started, I had a different producer who was awesome, and she served her purpose at that point. Like, shout out to Stephanie. Great job. But I was ready to kind of grow the podcast and really turn it into a marketing tool. So that is how I found Stacey, because that is the thing that she is an expert at, among other things. And that's why we started working together. So as we were thinking about what are the podcasts that I want to create and produce and put out there in the first quarter of 2024, in our quarterly call, which we do every quarter, sort of usually the month before the quarter starts, as we plan out the next 12 weeks, this topic of people hiring others to help them with their marketing, whatever that might be, whether it's helping them with blog writing, a podcast, SEO, like redoing their website, whatever marketing tools they're thinking about, hiring those experts before they're ready, before they know what they're actually marketing, is a problem. And I see this in my coaching business. A lot of people say to me, well, how am I going to do that? I could hire someone to help me do that. And like, you totally could hire someone to help you do that. But you need to know what you're talking about before you hire them. So the point of this podcast here is deciding what you want to focus on, what is important to you, who your audience is, what your message is, how important that those things are to know before you, for example, set up a consult call with Stacey Harris.
Absolutely. You mentioned that we come together quarterly to plan your next 12 weeks of content, and you're absolutely right. It is the final month of the quarter to plan the next quarter. I do it with all of our clients. It's my favorite 4 months of the year, and we talk strategy. And you know this, but let's tell them. Like, the first questions out of my mouth are always like, what are we selling this quarter? Who are we selling it to? Do we have any events going on? What's our focus? If you can't answer those questions, I don't like, it doesn't matter how good the marketing expert is that you've hired. Website, SEO, I see this a lot in paid ads. There's a big push of like, if I just pay for Facebook ads, then I'll get the leads I need. And it's like, cool. But the problem is not actually a leads problem. There's plenty of people finding you, but they're unclear on what you do, what you offer, and if it's for them, because you're unclear on what you do, what you offer, and if it's for them. And so it's hard for them to get clear on that. But it's incredibly common.
And I mean, I would be the first to say that I keep getting clearer and clearer on it, right? So this is an evolution kind of process. Like, you get better and better at it as time goes on. However, it's something that's really just essential to you growing. Like you said, it may not be a leads problem. It may be a messaging problem. It may be it could be
Sales
an offer problem.
An offer problem.
Right? It could be all these things.
It could be a lot of problems. And I think it always feels easiest to us. And I say we, because I'm as guilty of this as anybody, to go, well, if I just had more eyeballs, if I just had more people seeing it, if there were just more people, this would work. But if it's not working, if you can't convert 100 people, why do we think we're going to be able to convert if we have 1,000 people there?
Right. We don't need 1,000 people, actually. We just need 10 good ones, or whatever it is.
And that's a lot of what I talk about on my show with download numbers and whatnot. This is a conversation I have a ton, because it's like, if I could just get more listeners, and I'm like, cool, but how many people do you work with? For example, we work at a pretty high level with our clients. We work with like less than 10 people at a time. And our clients tend to stay with us for a pretty long time. I've got clients I've been working with 10 years. And so I don't actually need to attract more than like 4 to 8 people a year for the assortment of my offer. And most of those people end up in our mastermind, our small group program, or they end up in intensives with me, because we only have so many production spots a year. Like I said, our clients tend to stay. And so if I continued to focus on more and more and more, and I just continue to get poor quality leads, not because they're bad people, but because I have not set them up to identify that this is where they can get the solution that they need, I'm going to be putting myself through a ton of frustration, which is going to make the time where I do end up with somebody on a sales call that is a perfect fit lead, I am so frustrated and burned out, I can't even see it.
Right.
It's so detrimental to our business, but it's also wildly detrimental to like our get up and go as entrepreneurs, right? Our sales mojo as salespeople, which for a lot of us is kind of the primary role in our business, whether we want to believe it or not.
I know.
We are salespeople first.
Well, that's what I always say. Like, when you own a business, you have 2 jobs. You have to deliver the service or product of the business, and you also have the job of selling, the delivery and the sales. You are also a salesman no matter what. So if someone's saying, well, I'm just not good at sales, I'm not good at sales, so I'm going to invest in more marketing. And if I have perfect marketing, then the marketing is going to do the selling for me. Okay, now, there is a grain of truth in everything, right? So your marketing does have to do selling for you, but you have to tell the marketing who and what to sell. And actually, I would say that you can really only get good at answering that kind of question, who to market to and what to market, by doing it yourself, kind of grassroots a little bit in the beginning. So like you brought up Facebook ads. So I, since May, have been doing some Facebook ads. And I have grown my list, if we'll call it, tremendously with these Facebook ads. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think any of the people that I have that have now on my list as a result of a Facebook ad have bought one thing from me. I don't think any of them. And actually, I'm having a conversation about that next week because I think I need to change something up there or not do it at all. I will also tell you that the vast, vast, vast majority of my new clients come from having listened to me on a podcast, on a probably a guest podcast. And then they come listen to my podcast to like, see, let's listen to more of this person. And then they set up a consult call. And that is what I've found works best for me. And I think part of it is because one of the great parts about podcast marketing is that it's long form and that I can really share my message in a more than 20 seconds. So I think that's really good for me. But I had to learn that. Okay, so here's something I learned. I had to say to you, hey, Stacey, these podcasts really are my best support systems for nurturing new clients. And we have to think about that. Like, what do they want to hear? So marketing also, like if people hear enough of you and you're selling something that they can figure out in a Facebook ad is right for them, then go for it. But you have to also figure out like, how do your people consume or what is going to grow their belief in you? A Facebook ad might be enough, but it might not be.
It also has to be in alignment with your offer. When we talk about investing with someone like me, we work with our clients on a 12-month initial contract in production. We are a pretty full service strategy focused agency. It's not a small investment. It is an investment.
Yep.
It takes time to see the payoff of that. It also takes time for you to build trust enough to be like, yeah, I want to work with this person for a year. Let's take the money out of it. I want to spend a year talking to this person. That is a big mental capacity and emotional investment, right? I have to deal with this person for a year. Do I want that? I know a lot of coaches who are running 12-month programs also. Like, you need to make sure your clients are going to want to spend a year talking to you on the phone, getting your feedback. That's going to take some time to build that trust. And when I see a lot specifically with Facebook ads and short form marketing, even organic short form marketing like Reels and TikTok and things like that, we often expect the same turnaround as we do from like a sales call. For some reason, they're going to just see this 30-second video or this 90-second video even and be like, yes, let me pay this person $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month, whatever it is for a year and work with this person at a high level. And no, we have to get to know them. And that's one of the things I like about podcasts. For a lot of our clients, what we recommend with ads is who have a higher end service, instead of running ads to your offer, run ads to content, run ads to an opt-in, and then retarget those folks that are opting in to podcast content. Because you're seeing that uptick in your list. You're seeing that interest, but now it's the job of your email list and your podcast to nurture them to conversion. So now we're talking about our marketing assets being able to also serve as sales assets. And that's often where we kind of see the gap when people are hiring any kind of marketing expert, is because they don't have a full understanding of what their offer is and how they sell people. They're going to have a really hard time automating or systemizing that process and allowing their content, allowing their email, allowing those tools to support when they get that new lead from a podcast. So even though they're going and they're dumping this money into the Facebook ads and they're getting these leads, they're not seeing that conversion because they've not done enough of the sales process stuff to be able to automate it. And I see this a ton with early business owners. I'm going to call them out right now. I think this happens at every stage, but especially in that first couple of years, that fear of selling, that I don't want to be salesy, so I'm just going to run Facebook ads and put them through my email list and never have to get on sales calls with people. But how to put in the emails, what you need to talk about in content comes from hearing the questions on sales calls. Comes from that experience. frankly, maybe mostly the bad ones, the ones where you didn't get a yes, the ones that you were that were not a fit, very obviously very early in the call were not a fit. That's where we start to learn, cool, what do I need to make sure I have in my front-facing marketing materials to help them make a choice, to help them self-select? But also, what do I have in any sort of automations? What do I have in my content? What do I have sitting on my website that they're going to click around as they're getting to know me that support that process of them getting to know me, getting to know my expertise, and getting to understand the solution I offer and why or why not it's right for them? And that's what we're talking about when I talk about generating, educating, and converting with right fit clients. From a generation perspective, we've got SEO, we're optimizing on the front end for search discoverability, but also from that educate piece, that's the core of our long form content, right? So for you, the generate is going out and being on other people's podcasts so that we can drive them back to educate and convert.
Yes.
Your show has to do that because it's real hard to educate and convert solely in a podcast that is someone else's, right, as a guest.
Right.
And so you've got to be thinking about that whole process, not just the lead and the convert, but what's going to sit in the middle. And that middle is often figured out mostly, unfortunately, by experience.
It is. It's
Working
like
with
trial
poor
and
fit
error,
clients. Right? Yeah, having sales calls with poor fit and good fit clients. Like a lot of it is just boots on the ground, uncomfortable experience.
It
and
is.
that
It's
we try to skip that by investing.
Right. So we almost skip that middle piece. If you think of it as a continuum, right? We're skipping the middle piece. We're just like, what should I do? Who should I do? So I have a client, a shout out to Kate, the socialite, who does blogs. For her thing is blogs and newsletters for people in the home industries, interior designers, et cetera. And she and I have had a lot of conversations about how she customizes those for all of her clients. But half the time, her clients don't know who she should be customizing it for. And that's a real problem for her. So they went ahead and they hired her. And they think that's going to like solve all their problems. And it is going to solve, if this was going to be something that you were going to do on your own, it solves the time element. Like so it's definitely solving the time element. But for it to solve the increase your business, increase revenue, increase number of people you're serving problem, it is not going to solve that unless you figure out this piece ahead of time.
Absolutely. Right? And even with Kate's expertise, even with her, there may be some results just because you purely put somebody you're showing in there up, who right? has the
you're in people's inboxes.
Well, and you've handed it off to someone who simply has the capacity to actually do it. How many times are these things we're hiring out, things that aren't actually happening right now because they're sitting on a man, I wish I was doing kind of to-do list instead of actually being done. So you may see results just from the fact that you're doing it now. However, the results you're going to get are going to be less impactful, are going to be smaller. And also, and this is an entirely selfish point, but you make it really hard on the experts we hire. And when we respect the people we hire, and when we invest highly in the people we hire, and we enjoy the people we hire, we don't want to make their jobs harder. And that's what we do when we come to it unprepared. I say the same thing about, hiring a VA before you have any idea what your systems and processes are. If everything is living in your brain, you're never going to get the results from a third party that you want to be getting. You have to be taking that time to acknowledge what's in your head and put it somewhere so that someone else can actually support you with it. You're never going to get the support you want. You're never going to be able to hand off in the way you want to be handing things off. You're never going to be able to build the trust you want to be building with that person that you've hired to support you if you're not able to give them all of the information they need to get there. And to your point earlier, this evolves. This changes. Right, it evolves. But it can't, nothing will evolve to more nothing. No, this is one of the reasons we don't work. Yeah, we don't do a lot of podcast launches because I want you to go do it really, really messy, for the lack of a
Yeah.
better way to put it,
Yeah.
so that you can figure out if this is something you even want to do. I don't want to live through that experiment with you. It's not a good use of your money to
No, it is not a
go
good,
through that
and
experiment with a producer like me.
that's a good point. Because when I came to you, like I was in, like, I remember you asking me, like, how many episodes do you have? And whatever I told you,
Mhm.
you were, and I remember your reaction was like, good.
Yep.
Like, because you could tell that I had done it every week for 60 weeks. So I must be doing something. Right.
Well, it becomes about I want you to know that this is what you want to do before you do it.
Right.
Because again, completely selfishly,
Yeah.
maybe more transparent than I should be. I don't want to chase you down. I
No,
don't want to
no.
have to play school marm and like slap your hand with a ruler and be like,
Well, and
could
also
you
keep
please do
telling you,
what
like,
I asked?
you can do it. Keep going. It's because recording a podcast every week is actually like a huge,
It's a job.
it's a
It's a
job.
job.
It's a job.
It's
It's a job.
absolutely a job. Creating any kind of content is, but also I want you to have proven to yourself that this is worth your time, because we show up for it differently
Yes.
when we know that this is a good time investment. Again, let's set aside the money. Granted,
Right.
it's an
Right.
important part of the conversation,
Yes.
but it's
But
also a colossal waste of our time to be shoveling into something that's not going to get any sort of real payoff for us because we haven't made any decisions. And so I love when clients I say do at least 20 episodes messy. I like if you've done 50 because it means you've done a year of your show. If
yes.
you've done this for a year messy, either DIYing with not a lot of editing or with somebody who's just doing your editing and show notes, and then maybe they're not supporting you with the strategy. I have clients who sit down with me for intensives who are DIYing their production still because they're still figuring out if they want to do this. And we get together for an intensive and we do their strategy, and then they go and DIY their show. And they started with me last year. This year, we're looking at production. They needed to build the confidence that they could show up for this, that they knew how they wanted to present this info. And guess what? We were able to, at those intensives, start making some evolutions to their messaging, to how they presented their calls to action, to what their show notes were formatted like, or what kind of things they were talking about. We sort of took them lovingly out of jargon land, doing a show for their colleagues instead of their potential clients, and shifted them into talking more about what their clients need to know to make a decision. And so we were able to make those tweaks really early in their show so that they could see what it would feel like to do these shows in these different ways. But there was a lot of playing, a lot of evolving, a lot of teasing while they just figured it out on their own. They just started recording and playing with it. But if they had jumped ahead and hired me for production and we'd sat down, we wouldn't have been able to do any of that because I wouldn't have had anything to audit and to assess and to say, here's where our holes are around understanding. I listened to 3 episodes of your show. I don't know who you're talking to or what you're talking about.
So I use the science experiment analogy a lot, and this is a great way to think about it. It's as if you had this hypothesis and you've jumped all the way to the conclusion, right? The synopsis. You had the hypothesis and the synopsis, but you didn't do the experiment in the middle, right? So there's no way to figure out what was really working or not working. You're just guessing on the synopsis and the conclusion. And I find it super valuable. Like, I have coaches in all sorts of arenas, I'll call it, but I find it really valuable every quarter when we sit down because you indirectly force me to really think about what's coming up and how I want to prepare for that and how I want to be ready for that. And actually, I've gotten even better in my social media over the last quarter, like thinking ahead about that, which is kind of the same sort of thinking. But this is in and of itself a skill to be able to think about things not just that are just happening tomorrow. So if you're someone that says like, well, I don't even know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, or I don't even know who I'm going to be talking to tomorrow, we have some work to do because you've got to, if you're going to invest in any kind of marketing, you need to know who you're going to talk about 3 months from now, or who you're talking to 3 months from now, and what you're talking to them about. And actually, I had a client who was also a podcast producer, but she was kind of just the producer part. And she was very early on in her business. And she was getting frustrated by the people that were coming to her asking for her to produce the podcast. But she hadn't really done yet. This sort of like, I want to call it search and rescue, but it's not search and rescue. It's like search and discover or search and find. The search and find part, right? And so then when I started asking her questions, well, who do you love? Who's the best client you have right now? Why do you love them so much? What do they do? What about them do you not like? What's their beef? Like, why are you doing what you're doing for them? What's the problem you're solving? Then she started to get a little more into figuring out how to better market herself. Because actually it's funny because she's pretty good at marketing. Like she's really good at reels. She's really good at reels. She's really good at audio and all that because that's what she's doing. But the messaging, I was like, we got to work on the messaging. We got to work on the messaging. So even the expert in the actual production part of it still had to work on this stuff.
Honestly, my least favorite strategy to do is my own. It's still the thing that I have to go to the team and be like, guys, what does anyone talk about? what should we any of this really mean? Like it's hard to look at your own, and that's the benefit of investing. And I think the takeaway is not to never invest early on, but being really conscientious about who you're investing early on. And one of the things I recommend
with someone who's going to help you figure out that message.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. Like, I think that's one of the things that I do. I don't want to do the podcast production. I don't want to do the other stuff.
Well, and that's why when I get people on sales calls and they're like, oh, I ask them who they're talking to and what do you sell? And then I'm like, I have names for you. Let me just send you a list. But this is one of the things one of the things I recommend early on is working with someone like you in an intensive, in a 1-day setting where you can have a focus and say, I want to come in and this is my goal. Because you don't need to be investing necessarily in a 12-month relationship with somebody when you're still figuring out your messaging. But that'll give you a small bite. It'll give you some stuff to test on, so that you can test that for 3 months and then go, ooh, now I know what I want to adjust. Now I am willing to invest in 12 months with this person that helped me so that we can further flesh out our messaging, our marketing, our processes, our offers, what this is going to look like, so that on the, somewhere along the way in there, then I start investing in somebody who is helping me with content, because I'm starting to see how these things link together. I'm putting these things together step by step. I built enough after our intensive that I have something to experiment with and to evolve as we work together over the 12 months, instead of spending 12 months trying to help me make up a synopsis without ever doing the experiment.
Right. And that's what I do in those vision to action intensives, is we try to figure out, okay, what do you think this should look like? What's your vision? What would you love it to look like? Now, how do we create some actions from it, which might be work on your messaging? And then we kind of go from there. That's kind of exactly what I do in that. It's really a opportunity to, number one, test out, do you work liking with that person? But number two, help you figure out what you need to focus on in order to achieve your goals, in order to make that happen. And hire a podcast producer or someone to write your blogs may or may not be in there, or it may be in there if we're talking about like creating a plan for 12 months. It may be like, okay, let's take the first 2 quarters of the year, figure out the messaging, and then let's revisit this third quarter. Maybe you're ready to hire that person.
So, like I mentioned with the client earlier who does intensives, who last year did a handful of intensives with me. It was in our last intensive, they were like, cool, here's what we need to achieve for production to make sense. Here's where we're working towards for that kind of engagement to make sense for you. Because I don't want to put people in production where production's not a fit for them. That's not valuable to them. That's not a good use of my time. That's not a good use of my team's time. Right. I want to be working with people who are ready for that, who are going to get and see the experience and results that they want to from that container and that they should be getting from that container. And so sometimes that means that production right now is not the right offer. Sometimes it's somewhere along the way. And like I said, intensives are such a good way to go in and say, this is what I need clarity on. Yep. And so if you're somebody who, as we've had this conversation, are going, oh, I'm not super clear on my messaging, or I don't know. This is where I am a lot when I book intensives with people. I don't know if I'm clear or not, because I have thought about this for so long.
Yeah, you're in your own way. Angles. You're getting in your own way, right?
But I'm like, I just need literally someone else to tell me if any of the things I'm saying make sense at this point. And so I'll go and I'll book an intensive with my coach and I'll say, I need you to listen to me sort of just word vomit at you for 30 minutes. And then you tell me if any of it was English.
Yes. Yes.
And get that perspective. It's great use for intensives. I'm sure you do that a lot in
Yes.
intensives when you're talking about messaging. Oh, actually, you know a lot more than you think you know.
Right.
Let's give you
It's
the credit
incredible
that's due.
what comes out if you just have someone else asking you the questions. Right. I find that
We're
a
really
lot.
terrible at asking ourselves questions.
We are, because a lot of what I do in intensives is ask you questions. And then you get to sit there and kind of try to answer them, or realize you can't answer them, or realize the way you're answering is not what you've been telling yourself for the last 6 months. That's happened a lot. I had just had a client, because like, I can't believe I just said that, but that's really what I want to do.
I love that.
And it was kind of, actually, it gave her like so much permission to go after it. But if she was asking herself the question, she was just staying where she was. So
one of the things you mentioned earlier was, the looking ahead. So we often get so stuck in evaluating whether we're right or not that we're not looking ahead. And so, one of the best pieces of feedback I get from clients is they shift from what's next week's episode to what's happening 3 or 4 months from now in my business over the course of working together. And as you know, a lot of what our quarterly calls are me going, so what do you think about what questions are people asking? So what did they say on that call? Like, it's me just asking you questions and waiting for you to.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, they don't know what their messaging is, but they want to hire a podcast producer. That's a good episode.
We should do that.
We should do that. Well, I am really glad we've done this today, because this is, I think, super valuable for people to listen to. But valuable, actually, as you were talking, I was writing down some things I need to work on.
So really, this was a double whammy. To be fair, that's one of my favorite parts that we don't talk enough about being a podcast host that features guest experts, is they are basically free consult calls. Like, I always, when I had an interview show with guest experts, I was like, what are the things I want answered? What are the questions I have?
I just had,
because if I have it, somebody else does.
Sierra Stockland was like, we need to do another podcast together. Really, because when I talk to you, I learn a lot. That's why we're doing this. She just said that.
I love that.
Sounds like funny. She admitted it. She was honest. So thank you for being honest.
Honesty.
Sierra.
I like it.
But that was, she's like, I got some questions for you that I want the answers to. Okay.
If one person has them, other people have them.
Exactly.
That's good content. Let's book it. Producer approved.
All right. So if someone actually did want to book a consult or an intensive with you, where can they find you? They can always ask me, but where can they find you on their own?
You can ask Andrea.
Yes,
go to the link in the show notes, because I promise I'll put it there. No, everything.
Put her own link there. Perfect.
Yeah. Everything you could want is over at uncommonlymore.com. The podcast is there, which is a great place to start with. In the show notes of this episode, we'll actually link the episode you did on my show talking about the She Thinks Big book launch and how we use the podcast in the book launch. That's a great, you know what? Let's put that link in the show notes. That's a great thing to listen to after this, because we talk about it in what we're talking about today in a really kind of focused way around the book. So that's your homework. That's your assigned listening. Don't worry about any other links. Just I'll link in the show notes the Uncommonly More, the More Profitable podcast episode with Andrea, because I think that's a really good one to listen to after this.
It is. It's like kind of like it's like a case study.
It is, which is the only guests I have on my show.
They're the case studies. Okay. I like it. So
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This has been fun. It's always fun talking to you. I always laugh. We have some good giggles. Giggles. Yes, we do. Especially when Stacey's editing things. And I'm like, what do you think about this? So she's very diplomatic. Tells me, I think you could do it better. Or I think we should do it this way.
I think we could do it shorter.
We could do it shorter. So my friends, think about this. Are you clear on your messaging? Do you know who your audience is? You always are in a state of evolving. So it's always, I'm giving you permission to change it at any time, but you do have to, in the moment, be able to answer the question as well. So if that's something that you don't know the answer to yet, I would be happy to help you figure that out. And if we have figured that out, then let's figure out what marketing tools are best for you. Where is a good place to invest your money? With who? Are you ready for a podcast? If we're talking podcast, and all the things. So Thank you, Stacey, for being here. Check out those show notes. And until next time, remember, my friends, this is the time to level up. This right now. I always say this, but it's true. I'm looking out the window as it's snowing, and it's still a good time, even when it's snowing outside my window, to up your game. Give yourself an upgrade. Let's do this. See you next week.